Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's show. I have another exciting interview with our great herbalist and homeopathic friend from the wilds of the far reaches of the middle of nowhere in Canada, Miss Torey Lee, the legend of the Grow Network. So, Torey has recently completed a very interesting training session on the medicinal uses of seaweed. Now, y'all are going to find this fascinating. I know I did. You know, we don't have a lot of the seaweeds in the south that they get up north. So we don't have kelp and such. But Tori's going to tell us that, well, basically, from what she's told me, all seaweeds are useful. So without further ado, Tori, if you'd like to say hi to the folks, and we will jump right into this
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
thing. All right. So first of all, for those who haven't grown up near the coast, can you tell us basically what seaweed is?
Seaweed is classified as a macroalgae, which means giant algae. I was fascinated by that because some of them are so big and some of them look so plant-like that they don't seem to be algae.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yes, having spent much of my much of my life at the coast in the coastal swamps of the Carolinas, I can't tell you how many times I've been tangled up in big seaweeds out wading or swimming out in the ocean. They can be quite large.
Yes, the bull kelp that grows here on our coast can reach well over 30 feet. And we used to play with it as kids on
Yeah,
the beach.
and
All the
there's
seaweed, it was just seaweed. I didn't think anything else of it
yeah, same here.
until
You know,
much later.
I didn't even realize seaweed was edible until I looked into, what is that Caribbean stuff or what is that thing they're wrapping sushi with? We totally paid no attention to it as a kid.
Yes, I started to learn as I grew up about Japanese cuisine and that seaweed was in a variety of dishes as well as the traditional nori for sushi.
Yeah.
Um, I did know that carrageenan was used as a gelling agent or a thickener. Um, I was surprised to learn how many products carrageenan actually is in as a thickener and stabilizer.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Almost
surprised
all
too.
ice cream has carrageenan in it.
I know. Isn't that crazy? When you're eating ice cream, very often you're eating seaweed.
Hmm. But
And
other than that, I don't really know that much about seaweeds.
yeah.
So I've learned that a lot of them are edible.
Hmm.
Um, I came to learn about dulse before I took this course, and I wasn't really impressed with it
Yeah, I agree.
because I still remember the smell of seaweed from the beach as a kid. The stuff that had been laying there for days and
Hmm.
didn't smell very good. So it's a bit of an acquired taste when you've had that experience as a child. But
Absolutely. Yes, I
there's many
agree.
cultures who have grown up eating seaweed and are very accustomed to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very popular in Irish cuisine, and the traditional Welsh breakfast is really only different from the traditional English breakfast in that they serve seaweed, amazingly, and little winkles, little mollusks from the ocean. They're absolutely delicious. But also, tell me about the flavor enhancing ability of seaweeds, the glutamates. That's very interesting.
Yes, it's very much got that MSG type of effect, um, and it tastes salty on its own. It's very high in iodine, so if you're not using traditional table salt that's been iodized, then adding seaweed blend into your food is a good idea.
Hmm.
Or you can grind it further into a powder and just use that powder to sprinkle on food in place of salt.
Hmm. And it doesn't have any of the negative aspects of MSG?
No, no, it doesn't. You should start out small and get your body accustomed to being able to absorb the minerals the way they're presented in seaweeds. But once your body becomes accustomed to it, it's very easy to absorb all these lovely minerals that are in seaweeds. They're very high in a lot of beneficial minerals.
Interesting. Interesting. I know some of my permaculture friends have been looking into farming kelp as a means of capturing CO2. And some of them are even doing the, oh, how do you pronounce it? The lasso therapy, the water therapy and the salt water. Do you know much about that?
Yes, actually, there was a section of my course on glasso. I can't say it either. Glassotherapy, and then specifically aglotherapy, which is the therapy with seaweed. So I had heard about that before I took the course. Seaweed wraps in spas and seaweed masks, that sort of thing. But um, there's a couple of specific seaweeds that are very, very good to use for simple exfoliation. So you don't need to go to a fancy
Hmm,
spa. You can just go pick these seaweeds and use them yourself.
okay.
Turkish towel is one of them.
Oh, really? Okay. So I would imagine that would be rough, like like the old towels they used to rub, redden the skin with.
Yes, it's got a bumpy surface to it.
Hmm.
I don't think it's really rough, but just enough so that it helps with exfoliation.
What is that seaweed that it actually is one of the ones that grows commonly here? It almost looks like mistletoe. It has stems with leaves, and when you press them, they kind of pop and it squirts out salt water.
Oh, bladderwrack,
Really, that's bladderwrack. Okay.
and
Some
it's very common around the world.
and
Most places in the world, you'll be able to find one species or another of bladderwrack.
do you know anything about its specific properties?
Um, they were talking mostly about it being used for food
Uh-huh.
as opposed to medicine.
Okay.
But the medicinal properties they break down according to color. So they've got red, green, and brown seaweeds, and each one has its own properties. So the red seaweeds are the ones that have a lot of the carrageenan and agar in them, so
Mm-hmm.
they're the thickening seaweeds. And then there's the brown seaweeds. They can't remember the word. Fucoidans, I believe, is the name
Hmm.
that
Okay.
brown seaweeds have, and then alvins in the green seaweeds. So each one is fairly specific about what they do.
Mm-hmm. I just found your post on the Grow Network on this, and it said that the reds are. I'm going to try to break out my southern accent of Latin here. Rhodophyta. The browns are Phaeophyceae, Phaeophyceae, and the
Yeah,
greens are Chlorophyta. So that's how they're categorized, huh?
yeah, yes.
Oh. So okay. You did you say browns are the most medicinal. Is that what you said?
Right now, a lot of research is going on with the reds.
Okay, with the reds. Okay.
With in particular with carrageenan,
Mm-hmm.
and they've isolated a product called carrageenan that they're using for respiratory illnesses. They've made a nasal
Oh,
spray with it,
yeah, yeah.
and they're using it prophylactically
Mm-hmm.
to prevent infection, and then also if you do get a respiratory infection, it's been shown to reduce the length of time that you have it and reduce the symptoms that you have.
Okay, all right, yeah. Well, that brings me to the next question. You had mentioned that this compound or this aspect of these seaweeds has strong antiviral properties. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the theory behind using the carrageenan nasal spray is that um, it prevents viral adhesion to the cell wall.
Hmm.
So if the virus can't adhere to the cell wall, it can't penetrate, and if it can't get inside your cells, it can't replicate. So
Wow.
the cell just dies, the virus just dies.
So this could be good for the common cold, flu. Have they? What have they? What have they studied on it? Studied it on. Sorry.
Well, they've done quite a few studies, and it's been shown to be very effective in colds and flus.
Hmm.
And there's currently other studies going on right now with relation to coronavirus.
Wow.
There's a
Okay.
large human clinical trial going on at Swansea University in Wales, and there's one going to be going on in Vienna around the same time.
Really, really.
And so far the results look very promising.
So we're not politically correct here on my show. Could we say that this could be maybe prophylactic treatment against COVID-19 at some point?
Yes, that's what the study is based on. They're
Excellent.
specifically using COVID-19 to test it against,
That is that
and they're
is
suggesting
groundbreaking.
80% effectiveness.
80%. Okay, folks, you heard it here first. You heard it here first. There is a potential 80% effective preventive treatment for COVID-19 being studied. It's not in available yet, and we can't swear by it yet, but people are looking into it, potentially to prevent infection by the COVID-19 virus. That is absolutely amazing.
So they've also done a study in Argentina um, with 400 people that has shown it to be safe, well tolerated, no side effects from it. The subjects were divided into two groups, and the results of it were that there was 80% effectiveness.
Well, okay. You know, I actually don't know what the effectiveness ratings are of the current vaccines, but considering that they're now putting warnings out that it can cause heart inflammation in especially young people, I would imagine there are going to be a whole lot of us that would much rather take a nasal spray of seaweed than a shot in the arm of an unproven and, as of yet, still unapproved vaccine. But that reminds me, you also mentioned that seaweed has an immunomodulating effect. And as we have learned, unfortunately, with the COVID-19 virus, it's the cytokine storm that really causes the flare up that can be fatal. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, the cytokine storm is your body overreacting to the virus infection, and it actually starts to attack the body. That's what happened in the Spanish flu in 1918. Most of the deaths occurred in people between 20 and 40 to 50. It didn't affect older people as much, and it didn't affect children. And the reason being is because these were young, healthy people with a good, strong immune system, and their immune system went to work immediately. This was a brand new virus, and its immune system decided it was going to tackle this new virus with everything it had. And so it wasn't actually the virus that killed them, it was their body's inflammatory reaction, this cytokine storm that destroyed their lung tissue.
Hmm. Hmm.
So um, there's been suggestions on the internet about certain herbal medicines that might be creating a cytokine storm in the body, and don't use those.
Right.
But
Right.
there has been no proof of any herb causing a cytokine storm in anybody ever.
No. Okay. Yeah, I remember early on
I,
in the
I
virus, people were even warning against elderberry. I never really understood why they would say elderberry that is so useful against flus would actually be contraindicated with COVID. Do you have any idea?
um, yes, I read an article. I can't remember who wrote it. A fairly well-known herbalist who suggested that it was a couple of different articles that were taken out of context and made into one article saying that elderberry can create a cytokine storm because of its anti-inflammatory qualities, and it's just not true.
My word. That happens far too often, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I encourage people to do their own research whenever possible. Don't just go, oh, well, I saw this one study on the internet. Well, find several studies.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's what I've been doing with this seaweed project is I've been looking at several studies, not just the one or two studies that have come out with the various COVID vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Some of which haven't even been published yet,
Okay.
but these are all published, accepted studies with verifiable results.
And that reminds me, Tori and I both took the Southwestern School of Botanical Medicine course that the late Michael Moore offered. And he talked about how it was an Artemisia, a member of the wormwood family, that was found to be very effective against the Spanish flu. Isn't that right?
Yes, I believe it was Sweet Annie.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can't remember the Latin one
Right.
for that.
Yeah.
But they're also finding that it's very good against malaria.
And this is just what we would call a weed, a bitter herb that is overlooked by so many people, but it's in the same family as wormwood, southernwood, mugwort. Um, and, again, according to Michael Moore, who was I guess you would say, the expert on herbs from the western part of the United States, it was more effective than the pharmaceuticals that were developed to combat the Spanish flu. So, if this is the case with the seaweeds, it's certainly not without precedent, and I think this is absolutely amazing.
Yes, I was very impressed when I took the course and discovered all of these antiviral properties.
Oh, it also has strong antioxidant properties, right?
Yes, it's very good as a food medicine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And potentially even anti-cancer.
Yeah, they're working on studies, um, some of it based on indigenous medicine.
I know there have been many studies that show low incidence of cancer in countries that eat a lot of seaweed as part of their diet. Is that something you looked into in this course?
Um, yeah, the one particular seaweed that they're looking at, well, not one particular one, but the group of seaweeds is the brown seaweeds.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in vitro studies have shown that extracts have been able to um, attack and shrink cancer cells.
Really? Wow. Okay. Now, here's a word that I am unfamiliar with, and it's one you had in your notes. Anti-hyperlipidemic. Can you explain that and what that means and what seaweed does in that capacity?
Okay, so it means it's a statin.
Oh, okay.
Uh, Lipids are the cholesterol fats.
Mm-hmm.
So anti-hyperlipidemic, so high cholesterol, anti-high cholesterol.
Okay.
But it doesn't work like a statin.
Mm-hmm.
It um, it just lowers your cholesterol naturally without being a statin.
Good.
And
Okay.
they talk about red yeast being a substitute for a statin,
Right.
but it works very similar to a statin. Whereas the seaweeds,
A few years ago, red yeast really was quite the controversy when a certain high-profile media figure decided to try red yeast for his cholesterol, and it worked far too well, and he ended up having to go to the hospital, and he then created a crusade against herbal medicine and natural remedies. So if seaweed doesn't put it in the negative category, I guess you'd say, that would be a good thing. That would be a very good thing.
yeah, they're really high in potassium,
Hmm.
which is good for mild to moderate hypertension.
Yeah.
Um, it's good for the liver. It's good for the endocrine system. So all of these things help to balance out really as your body
Uh-huh.
intended for it to be used.
If only someone had told Bill O'Reilly about seaweed, I wouldn't have had people charging into the health food store I used to work in and accusing me of trying to kill people with red rice yeast. Of course, he also went on a crusade against um mahuang, Chinese ephedra. That was back when there were a lot of shady supplements putting ephedra, and certain high school athletes were having heart attacks because of it. So he really caused a lot of controversy there for a while. Other than that, he seems to be a decent guy. But my word, he made my life difficult for a good year there.
Well, that's a good balance and check system when you've got somebody like that that's saying, "Hey, don't get caught up in this bad idea
Hmm.
that it's a cure-all."
Exactly. Yes. And of course, mahwag, ephedra, can be very dangerous. So can red red rice yeast if used improperly, because just like with statins, people can have very bad adverse reactions. Can be cause dementia, tremors, all kinds of bad stuff.
Yeah, our bodies need cholesterol. I'm not a big fan of the idea that everybody has to lower their cholesterol.
No, no, nor am
Some
I.
people function well with high cholesterol rates and have no adverse effect from it. Uh,
Exactly. Yes.
and and actually, the idea of giving women statins, all of the studies done on statins are done on 50 to 60-year-old males.
Right.
So there is absolutely no clinical evidence that statins do anything for women's health.
Not only that, but if I remember correctly, in the Western A. Price literature, there's not been a single clinical study that has absolutely proven that high cholesterol is bad for your health.
No, they just suggest that because there are cases where people have so much cholesterol that it has plugged your arteries. So with that, they decided that cholesterol was bad for everybody.
Yeah.
But your brain is 25% cholesterol.
Hmm.
So if you start lowering your cholesterol levels too much, you're going to lower the cholesterol in your brain too, as well as your blood vessels.
Sure. And your hormones, your body makes hormones out of fat. You can totally screw
Yes.
yourself up if you cut out fat or if you try to lower your cholesterol. And it really should, in my opinion, and I could be off on this, you're much more the expert than I am. The lack of niacin that can cause the little tears in the artery to which the cholesterol adheres seems to me to be more the cause of clogged arteries than the actual cholesterol itself.
Yes, because cholesterol is just doing its job and trying to repair things. It just gets carried away with it and builds up too much.
Right, right. And there's several things to do that. We could talk about anabolic steroids. We could talk about comfrey. Comfrey is only a potential cancer-causing agent because it propagates proteins and can cause any cells to grow. You know, it could be a tumor or it could be repairing a broken bone. It doesn't mean comfrey's a bad thing. It just means comfrey has to be used in the right situation.
Exactly. People who have cancer or think they might be developing a tumor of some kind should definitely not use comfrey. There's many other people that use comfrey on a regular basis. Susan Weed, comfrey is one of the 5 herbs that she cycles through with her nourishing herbal infusions. So
Hmm.
she drinks a quart of comfrey at least once a week.
But it's far more than any government agency would ever recommend. But is actually less carcinogenic than the tiny bit of alcohol in one can of beer.
Yes, I am in agreement with you there because most cans of beer are not made well.
No, they're not. That is true. As a home brewer, I can absolutely agree with that. All right, so back to seaweed. You also mentioned that seaweed is anti-diabetic. Now, tell us about that.
So it's good for the endocrine system. It's going to help with spleen and the pancreas as well. Okay, so it's fucodin that's in the brown seaweeds that shows a strong inhibitory effect against um, carbohydrate hydrolyzing enzymes, which affect blood glucose levels. And so having a lot of seaweed in your diet will help keep your blood glucose levels from spiking.
All right, so that would help prevent insulin resistance. That helps keeps everything on an even keel. Okay.
Yes,
And you also made a mention of a traditional Chinese medicine aspect that seaweeds in general reduce yang and increase yin. So this would be a more yin type of herb in that sense. So cooling as opposed to
yes.
heating.
Oh, yes. So if you're suffering from excess yang, you've got a very hot um, metabolism, then seaweeds will help you to come back into balance.
Okay. All right. Let's see, you mentioned one contraindication, and that was high potassium levels. Yeah, you also mentioned the anticoagulant properties.
Yes. So if you're on blood thinners, you should talk to your healthcare provider before you start adding seaweeds. And if you suffer from hyperkalemia, which is an overabundance of potassium in your body,
Hmm.
again, you should talk with your healthcare provider before you start eating a lot of seaweeds.
Okay. Well, beyond that, you know, seaweed is a fantastic fertilizer. Uh, Organic gardeners have been using it for a very long time. The Irish particularly use it for animal feed. It's essentially a an ocean crop that I think is very underutilized. Do you see, I don't know, maybe a potential for a new agricultural industry in seaweed?
Actually, there's 2 companies that I know of for sure off the BC coast that are doing this. They're both farming kelp.
Hmm.
One has partnered with a First Nation to do it,
Okay.
and they've got their website up and running, and they predict that they should have some product ready before the end of the year.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay, I guess that's about all the questions I had. Is there anything you want to add to?
Just a little bit about the fallout, the radiation from Fukushima,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
that people should be concerned about that in any of the seaweeds that they're consuming or harvesting or purchasing that may have been harvested on the West Coast. They discovered that there was a small spike in radioactive iodine in the water
Mhm.
off the coast um, right after the occurrence, and it was suggested that it traveled here in rain clouds rather than ocean currents.
Oh, wow. Okay.
and within 2 weeks of the fallout, levels were back to normal.
Isn't that incredible? I've seen so many horror stories and doomsday scenarios, whether it was about nuclear fallout or so many things, and it's just amazing how the oceans and the storms and the evaporative cycle just seems to bind things up and tuck them away and prevent this horrible scenario that we're always warned about.
Yes, and the lady that did the course that I took, she's a very organic person. Her and her
Hmm.
husband own a herb company. So if there was any indication at all that there was any danger, she wouldn't be promoting the use of seaweed. So
Sure, absolutely.
they're very, very safe.
Yeah. I'm a total believer that we have to take care of the environment and we have to be very concerned about what we put in our bodies. Did you ever hear Charlton Heston read the introductory chapter to a Michael Crichton novel?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you're gonna love it. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. You're gonna love it, and it'll probably be the least politically correct thing I post for a while.
Well, it doesn't sound like it's politically incorrect. It sounds like it's right on the money.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I'm not saying global warming may be happening. It may be anthropogenic man caused. It may not be. I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. All we can do is just adapt and try not to screw things up.
That's right. You know, it's obvious sometimes looking at some of the things that we're doing, pumping sulfuric acid
Yeah.
fumes into the
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
that's contributing to it.
Hmm.
But the earth has been going through cycles for a very long time, and we've been warming up since the ice age.
Right. I mean, desertification, that's probably my big concern. I always worry about, agriculture turning once fertile lands into deserts. But the bottom line is, if this grand solar minimum thing is for real, we're about to go into a cooling period and we have no idea what's going to happen. We haven't seen this in our time, not since the last mini ice.
Yeah, around 1500, 1600.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, all we can do is just try to adapt and be prepared.
Think man can destroy the planet? What intoxicating vanity. Let me tell you about our planet. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. There's been life on it for nearly that long. 3.8 billion years. Bacteria first, later the first multicellular life, and the first complex creatures in the sea, on the land. Then, finally, the great sweeping ages of animals, the amphibians, the dinosaurs, at last the mammals, each one enduring millions on millions of years. Great dynasties of creatures rising, flourishing, dying away. All this against a background of continuous and violent upheaval. Mountain ranges thrust up, eroded away, cometary impacts, volcanic eruptions, oceans rising and falling. Whole continents moving in endless, constant, violent change, colliding, buckling to make mountains over billions of years. Earth has survived everything in its time. It will certainly survive us. If all the nuclear weapons in the world went off at once, all the plants, all the animals died, and the Earth was clicking hot for 100,000 years, life would survive somewhere under the soil, frozen in Arctic ice. Sooner or later, when the planet was no longer inhospitable, life would spread again. The evolutionary process would begin again. Might take a few billion years for life to regain its present variety. Of course, it would be very different from what it is now. But the Earth would survive our folly, only we would not. If the ozone layer gets thinner, ultraviolet radiation sears the Earth. So what? Ultraviolet radiation is good for life. It's powerful energy. It promotes mutation, change. Many forms of life will thrive with more UV radiation. Many others will die out. You think this is the first time that's happened? Think about oxygen. Necessary for life now. But oxygen is actually a metabolic poison, a corrosive gas, like fluorine. When oxygen was first produced as a waste product by certain plant cells some 3 billion years ago, it eventually had an atmosphere incompatible with life. Nevertheless, life on Earth took care of itself. In the thinking of the human being, 100 years is a long time. 100 years ago, we didn't have cars, airplanes, computers, or vaccines. It was a whole different world. But to the Earth, 100 years is nothing. A million years is nothing. This planet lives and breathes on a much vaster scale. We can't imagine its slow and powerful rhythms, and we haven't got the humility to try. We've been residents here for the blink of an eye. If we're gone tomorrow, the Earth will not.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.